Good morning. I'm Gleitsman, and it's my honor on behalf of the Gleitsman Foundation to welcome you this morning as we present our Citizen Activist Awards and our Michael Schwerner Activist Awards to a group of people that truly represent multi-generational activism. We're here today to celebrate 7 people who are struggling to change the status quo. Some are just starting the battle. One has been working at the cause for his entire life. We hope that by learning of the successes of our winners, others will realize that the process produces results and will pursue their own activist goals. 3 decades ago, Michael Schwerner, a Cornell graduate and burgeoning civil rights activist, was cut down in his prime, kidnapped and murdered in Mississippi, along with fellow activists James Chaney and Andrew Goodman in June of 1964. We've named one of our activist awards in honor of Michael Schwerner. But had we named it today, we may have looked to Amy Biehl. A Stanford graduate and a Fulbright scholar, Amy Biehl was killed in Cape Town, South Africa on August 25th, 1993. She had gone to fight racism, yet her life, like that of Michael Schwerner, was ended in that effort. Michael was not yet 25 when he was killed. Amy was 26. Today you will hear from Amy's sister, Molly, who will introduce our 5 Student Activist Award winners: David Benjamin, Susan Dutton, Debbie Kane, John McDaniel, and Hunter Schofield, 5 determined individuals representing the next generation of activism. Perhaps they will one day emulate the wonderful achievements of Wendy, Kopp, and Ralph Nader, the winners of our Citizen Activist Award that we will present today. Wendy Kopp was a student at Princeton when she first envisioned a Peace Corps for teachers that would become Teach for America. Miraculously, in little more than a year, she turned her brainstorm into a senior thesis, turned that thesis into a proposal, persuaded major corporations to donate more than $1 million, recruited students, and talked schools into hiring them as full-fledged teachers. Few citizens have had a bigger impact on our day-to-day life than Ralph Nader. As a result of his efforts, Americans drive safer cars, buy better products, eat healthier food, breathe cleaner air, and are governed more openly. He is a true public servant whose lifetime of activism serves as a beacon for others willing to forego comfort for change. Our International Activist Award honors those activists outside of the United States whose courage has rallied others in the struggle for change. Last year, we traveled to South Africa to honor Nelson Mandela, whose unflagging fight against apartheid continued through nearly 3 decades in prison and culminated just a few weeks ago with his election as President of the Republic of South Africa in his nation's first democratic election. We also recognized Wei Zheng-sheng, who had then spent 14 years in jail, almost all of it in solitary confinement, and now has again been imprisoned for continuing his struggle to bring democratic reform to his native China. As one activist to another, I call upon all of you present today to do what you can to press for the freedom of Wei Zheng-sheng. As we introduce our activist honorees to you, I hope that you will find inspiration in their words and their works, and I thank you for being part of this very special day. To present the Citizen Activist Award to Ralph Nader, we are honored to have Senator Robert Byrd, the senior senator from West Virginia, here with us today. Senator Byrd, the second most senior member of the United States Senate, has been Majority Whip, Majority Leader, and now the Chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee. I greatly admire the fact that from humble beginnings, he has, with great persistence, worked toward his goals, in the process earning his law degree while in the U.S. Senate, and somehow also finding the time to become a serious student of history. We are honored to have Senator Byrd with us today, and it is indicative of the importance of the work of Ralph Nader. It's with great pleasure that I present Senator Robert Byrd.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm privileged to have been invited to participate here this morning. In ancient Athens, Socrates earned a permanent place for himself in Western philosophy by asking embarrassing questions of powerful men who believed themselves the final authorities on every subject. In our own era, we have benefited by the services of a modern version of Socrates, a man who asks important questions of people who sometimes believe that nobody has the authority to question them on a number of subjects vital to all of us. And that modern Socrates, that 20th century gadfly, is none other than Ralph Nader, a man who has taken seriously his responsibilities as a citizen and who has accepted the burden of asking questions that others too often are too timid to ask. In formulating the award that is about to be presented to Mr. Nader, the Gleitsman Foundation has aimed at citing men and women who, outside the duties of the elected office or an assigned public duty, have made a difference in the lives of hundreds or thousands or millions of their fellow citizens. Can anyone doubt that in his efforts on behalf of public responsibilities, can anyone doubt that Ralph Nader has made a difference in the lives of hundreds or thousands or millions? For more than 3 decades, Ralph Nader has been fighting battles for safety, responsibility, and plain common sense for all of us. And so I congratulate Mr. Gleitsman and all those who have made this selection. And I thank you for allowing me the privilege and the honor and the pleasure to present the award. When a man does a deed that you really admire, don't leave a kind word unsaid. For fear to do so might make him vain or cause him to lose his head. But reach out your hand and tell him, well done, and see his gratitude swells. It's going right up to the man himself. It isn't the flowers that we throw into the grave. It's the word to the living that tells. I almost was confused with a first verse rather than a second there. Now I am honored to present to Ralph Nader the Citizen Activist Award and to introduce to you this special, or rather to present to you. He didn't have to be introduced to any of us. Present to you this very special American, Mr. Ralph Nader.
Thank you very much, Senator Bryd, who I consider a constitutional senator, one who studies, writes, reminds, and acts on the provisions of our Constitution at a time when the separation of powers and the differences between declarations of war and resolutions of Congress or trade agreements or treaties are being seriously blurred. His scholarship writings have etched in the memory of many of us who've been around here in Washington for quite a while the importance of knowing our history, not just to appreciate it, but to apply the lessons of history to contemporary political life. It's been said that Senator Bryd is one of the last orators of the Senate. I think his legacy will be to remind us all that the Constitution is not to be overridden by changes in language or other blurs that demean its significance and its telling address on the issues of separation of power and federalism. I want to thank Gleitsman, of course, for launching this annual Citizen Award activity, and also the Board of Judges and the Gleitsman Foundation. We stand here in the line of previous award winners, nationally and internationally, who have displayed courage and have connected their knowledge to their action in their daily activity. I also am very proud as a graduate of Princeton to see that my co-awardee, Wendy Kopp, did what I've always asked students to do at Princeton, and that is write a senior thesis and apply it to postgraduate activity in the work that you choose. I'm also very pleased to see that a number of undergraduates here today have been given recognition for not only connecting promise to performance, but for displaying in their daily lives, sometimes to their own discomfort, their principles in action. These awards are important not just for incentives and not just for motivations. They're important because they declare in a greater profile the standards of civic activity and commitment that lies at the root of our democratic society and that will sustain it. And students who very often get awards for athletic endeavor and for their grade point average very rarely are recognized for their civic commitment and their civic accomplishments. And I particularly appreciate the Gleitsman Foundation and you, Alan, in expanding the award in that direction. Thank you all.
appreciate his being able to take time from his schedule with us today. Because of the very strong parallel between Michael Schwerner's struggle to help the blacks to vote in the south of the United States and Amy Biehl's work in the same cause in South Africa, it's very fitting that Molly Biehl is here with us today to present our collegiate awards. Molly received her BA with honors from the University of California, Santa Barbara in June of 1992. While in college and since, she has always worked for causes in which she believes to help the poor, the disabled, the frail, and others in need. And just 3 weeks ago, here in Washington, Molly launched the initial fundraising effort for the Amy Biehl Foundation with an event that raised more than $30,000. Knowing her parents, who are also here with us today, I think you will agree with me that there's a very good bloodline in the Biehl family, and I'm very proud to introduce to you Miss Molly Biehl.
It is an honor to present the 1994 Michael Schwerner Activist Award to 5 very deserving recipients. I'm doing so in spirit of my sister Amy Biehl. Amy was a 26-year-old Fulbright scholar who, like today's recipients, just wanted to make a difference in the world. She had been working in South African townships to educate and register black voters to prepare for their first elections, Democratic elections, just a few weeks ago. Amy's mission was cut short, however, when she was slain by a mob of youths in Guguletu Township outside of Cape Town, August 25th of 1993. Michael Schwerner was only 24 when his mission to educate and register black voters in Mississippi was brought to a halt in 1964. Michael and his friends, Andrew Goodman and James Chaney, were arrested for speeding, released into the hands of the KKK, shot, killed, and buried by a bulldozer. Although I do not know him personally, I can confidently say that neither Michael Schwerner nor Amy Biehl would want us to dwell over the circumstances of their deaths. Rather, we should reflect upon and be inspired by the contributions they were able to make in such short lifetimes. They both simply wanted to make a difference. Michael Schwerner, Amy Biehl, and today's award recipients are activists. They've made things happen. They are fully committed to social justice and putting cause before self, work diligently for the basic rights and freedoms of others. They are not your typical undergraduate students. David Benjamin, for instance, left Harvard for 2 years to serve in an urban youth service corps. In Boston City Year program, David was building low-income housing and establishing urban after-school programs, while his peers were in the classroom learning the tricks of investment banking. At the age when most of us are marching through our homes, protesting the consumption of Brussels sprouts, Susan Dutton was marching on Washington with her parents. Today, she is a leader in the newly founded Campus Action for Social Equality and Justice program at Connecticut College. Emphasizing cross-generational activism, Susan organizes teach-ins and business forums on racial relations. She heads voter registration programs and has created an annual Art Against Racism Day. Putting cause before self, Debbie Kane organized a week-long celebration of abilities at the University of Central Florida. Within this week, she taught the faculty and the students who were not disabled what it was like to live life in a wheelchair. Debbie Kane made a difference. After this week, there are many installations of much-needed equipment for the disabled in the university. John McDaniel took his learning beyond the classroom and founded Students Together Alleviating Racial Tension. This group aids in facilitating multiracial communication, both at Bloomsburg University and throughout the community. As a result of his efforts, Bloomsburg University of Pennsylvania now expects all students to fulfill the cultural diversity requirement prior to graduation. While most Appalachian State University students worry over whether paper should be separated from plastic or aluminum from glass, Hunter Schofield is out leading community recycling efforts. He is the founder of SAVE, students actively volunteering for the environment. Hunter sits not only as a senator in the Student Government Association, but as the first student ever elected to the Boomtown Council. It is the tenacity of individuals like David, Susan, Debbie, John, and Hunter which sets them aside from those who just read about the issues. It is the selfless dedication and tireless effort which enables seemingly ordinary individuals to do extraordinary things. I congratulate you all, along with Michael Schwerner and Amy Biehl, for accomplishing, as just undergraduates, what the rest of us who want to make a difference can only hope to accomplish in 100 years. Thank you. And we'd like to present the certificates and the awards. First to John McDaniel. Susan Dutton. And David Benjamin. And to Debbie Kane.
Thank you, Molly. Our next presenter has dedicated his life to improving the educational standards of our country. In 1971, Dr. William Smith became director of the USOE Teachers Corps, an organization upon which Wendy Kopp would model her own Teach for America. After a series of other posts at the USOE, Dr. Smith was appointed U.S. Commissioner of Education in 1979 and currently serves as Administrator for Management Services in the Office of Human Resources and Administration. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. William Smith.
Thank you very much. I probably have had the greatest single thrill to be sitting on the same dais with Ralph Nader and Senator Bryd and all of the rest of the august group, but I go back to Senator and Ralph Nader because I read about them all the time. It's an extreme honor, Alan, to have this opportunity. In 1989, my phone rang. I was then the acting Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights. And a young lady said, my name is Wendy Kopp and I am a senior at Princeton, and I understand that if I plan to do this, I've got to talk to you. And I said, fine, what is it that you'd like? And she said, I have this idea of doing something with college graduates to serve those young people who are poor. I said, come down. So she came. And I assembled a group of people who had been involved in Teacher Corps over the years. And we talked. And when we finished, she looked out the window and she paused in the middle of her conversation and said, I have this dream that, and proceeded to tell us what it was she dreamed. And I, an established bureaucrat of 25 years, said, and this too shall pass. She graduated, And the phone rang again. And she said, now I'm ready to go to work. And I said, well, what have you done? And she said, I've sent my proposal around, and I received $35,000 from a foundation. I think it was Molly Biehl. I may be embellishing the story, but it's my story, so. And she met with the CEOs, having had the experience at Princeton of editing their business magazine. And after she had completed it, she went back to Mobile to report to them the success she'd had, and she pointed out to them that she was able to get a number of companies to commit themselves. And Mobile said, fine. We, of course, started this whole thing. And she said, yes, but I'd like you to be in it over the long haul. The CEO said, I don't understand. We're starting. She said, the floor for industry is 100,000. And so they had to come up with the other 65,000 to be a member of her team. The reason that this story is important to me is that this young lady, who on 5 separate occasions I had the opportunity to say this too shall pass, continued to prove that she would be able to do something that we in the bureaucracy with millions of dollars and millions of problems felt she would not have the opportunity to complete. And yet she has now established a tradition that is unsurpassed, because what she has done is provided colleges of education with an example of what they argue they cannot do, which is to recruit into teaching students who come from quality institutions and who are quality scholars themselves, most often outside of education. And she has shown that they are committed. And for those of us old bureaucrats who have seen all of the action come and go, it is startling to realize that the single most important example that she has demonstrated for us is that out there are young people who are committed to social change and who are willing to give up themselves to do something about it. And that's a very rare, rare thing in this period of time. She has been able to get young people from all of the major institutions across this country to commit themselves to a minimum of 2 years of service in rural or urban low-income schools, and to provide the kind of incentive and education that is most beneficial to those children. The thing I have said about Wendy is that when you talk with her and she is talking about the present, you recognize that she is also expressing the vision of the future. She is a young woman who has begun, but has not yet achieved all that will be available to her. It is my pleasure to present to you Ms. Wendy Kopp.
Thank you very much. Dr. Smith has been an extraordinary help to me and to Teach for America over the past 5 years, and it's an honor to have him present this award. And thank you as well to the Board of Judges and to Mr. Gleitsman. I view this award as a tribute not to my individual efforts, but to the efforts of thousands of individuals, of staff members, and of corps members, our teachers, who are working, going above and beyond every day, whether it be in South Central Los Angeles or the Rio Grande Valley in Texas or the South Bronx in New York, to ensure that their students achieve, to ensure that they excel, to ensure that they achieve in some of the most under-resourced schools in the country what we would hope that all students, wherever they might be going to school, would achieve. And I appreciate this award simply because I think it will provide further inspiration to what I now believe must be, has to be, a long-term commitment to realize the day when all students in this country have an equal opportunity to attain an excellent education. So thank you.
injustice and initiate change. And it's with pride that the Gleitsman Foundation has this opportunity to recognize their work. At this time, I'd like to invite all our invited guests for luncheon, which will start, I presume, in a few minutes in the rear of the room. Thank you for attending.
Wendy, can I get you next to Sherry? Right here. Where are you, sir? Debbie, are you coming? Well, that's great.
Like hearing what Mr. Nader had to say.
If I can interrupt just for a second. While we have you, while we have everyone in one place, forgive me.
That's all right.
Great. Thank you all very much. I will send you all photos. Okay. Trust me, okay?
Here's your drink. Oh, I have your drink order.
Right. How are you? White one. Great. It's closed.
Yeah, before it's the last stop.
Just what we need to prepare.
more people, and you can really target it to those in that geographic area. But I like the Midwest Academy. I actually saw Heather Booth last week.
Where do you
Sick today. And it's a very
and I'm a member of the board of directors of the Gleitsman Foundation, and I want to welcome you. We all want to welcome you to this luncheon today, honoring 7 individuals whose courage and commitment and persistence inspire us all. Since 1989, my goodness, the Gleitsman Foundation has sought to identify and recognize such individuals around the world. We sponsored 3 awards, international, domestic, and student. And in a press conference earlier, we bestowed the 2 latter, the Citizen Activist Award to Ralph Nader and Wendy Kopp, and the Michael Schwerner Activist Award to David Benjamin, Susan Dutton, Debbie Kane, John McDaniel, and Hunter Schofield. The road that led us here today began in September 1986 when Alan Gleitsman sold his television distribution company and decided to refocus his time, energy, and resources on the social and political issues that had concerned him for years. In 1989, he established the Gleitsman Foundation, a nonprofit organization that would recognize and promote social activism. Specifically, it sought to honor those individuals who had personally fought for social and economic justice, human rights, environmentalism, or against such social ills as racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, or other forms of oppression. Seeking to honor American citizens who have risen to challenge and correct injustice in their communities, the Foundation first created the Citizen Activist Award. Since 1990, nominations by governors, mayors, members of Congress, other U.S. leaders, and private citizens have been submitted to awarded judges who determine the winners. The board includes such prominent individuals as Pulitzer Prize-winning author and professor Dr. Robert Coles, actor and environmentalist Ted Danson, civil rights attorney Morris Dees Jr., Mothers Against Drunk Driving founder Candy Lightner, who's with us today, activist and philanthropist Stanley K. Scheinbaum, and feminist leader Gloria Steinem. Over the years, our Citizen Activist Award winners have been distinguished by their commitment to such issues as racial equality, child care, fair housing, government accountability, and the rights of the working women and the handicapped. Former winners Lewis Clark and Karen Nussbaum are also with us today. Our 1994 winners, Ralph Nader and Wendy Kopp, add further significance to this list, and you will hear more about and from them later. Established in 1992, the Michael Schwerner Activist Award is dedicated to the memory of the impassioned civil rights worker who was kidnapped and murdered in Mississippi, along with co-workers James Chaney and Andrew Goodman in June 1964, during the height of the civil rights movement. Guided by a separate board of judges, the Foundation bestows awards each year to 5 full-time undergraduate college students who best fulfill the spirit of activism exemplified by Michael Schwerner. If our 1994 Schwerner winners could please just stand when I mention your names so everyone can see who you are. David Benjamin. David is a student at Harvard University. And David took a 2-year hiatus after his freshman year to work for City Year, a youth service corps benefiting Boston area residents. Susan Dutton. For racial harmony at Connecticut College through Case J, Campus Action for Social Equality and Justice. Debbie Kane, here at this table to my left. Debbie is a lifelong activist for disabled rights, and she launched an annual Celebration of Abilities Week at the University of Central Florida to educate both faculty and students about the issues that impact the handicapped. John McDaniel, John and Barbara. John is from Bloomsburg University of Pennsylvania and has pursued a course of Unity Through Diversity as a founding member of START, Students Together Alleviating Racial Tension. Hunter Schofield. Hunter is a student at Appalachian State University and is founder of SAVE, Students actively volunteering for the environment, as well as a founder or active member of numerous other environmental efforts. Please join me in applauding the efforts of all of these committed young people. Vision and passion will surely guide them to success in the future. Last year, the foundation expanded its focus to the world community with the establishment of the International Activist Award, which is presented in alternating years with the Citizen Activist Award. Our 1993 winners were Chinese dissident Wei Xing and the newly elected President of South Africa, Nelson Mandela. This year, a convergence of commemorative dates further binds our honorees in celebration. 1994 marks the 5th anniversary of Teach for America, as well as the 5th anniversary of the Gleitsman Foundation. So we would like to thank all of you for joining us today in this celebration. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, who for more than 3 decades has been one of the more perceptive and cogent voices among the American media. An Emmy-winning correspondent for the PBS series Frontline, he served for 15 years as a national correspondent, editor, and columnist with the Washington Post. National editor of Rolling Stone, in recent years he has written a regular column on politics and national affairs, and recently the magazine published his White House interview with President Clinton. A respected author, he has written 3 best-selling books on Reaganomics, the decay of accountability in the American political system, and the Federal Reserve Board, and is currently working on a 4th, an examination of the economic revolution sweeping the nations of the world. I'm glad he had time to join us today. I also understand that as he was one of the first to recognize the power and the impact of the activism inspired by Ralph Nader, that he is credited with coining the phrase, Nader's Raiders. We'll ask him. Please welcome Mr. Bill Ryder.
There's some historical dispute about the origins of Nader's Raiders, but it got pinned on me, and for 5 or 10 years afterwards, every time I saw Ralph Nader, he would beat up on me for making that trivializing description of the citizen action which he was launching. So I guess I might as well take credit for it. I've been in Washington more than 25 years now, approaching 30 years. And I would say, of all of the supposed important people I've met, nobody stands higher than Ralph Nader. I was lucky to be president of the creation, where he, out of his own, really, I would say, democratic imagination, recognized that there was this unfilled space. And out of his intellect and ego, decided that he would help fill it. And he has. It's quite extraordinary. Now, I should point out that he is a Princeton graduate, and so is Wendy, and so am I. So despite what you have read, this university is a real hotbed of something. I don't know quite what it is. We had a dinner a couple of years ago. Ralph is good about a lot of things. He's not good on dates. So we celebrated, what was it, the 20th anniversary of Nader's Raiders. I think the 21st or 22nd year afterwards. The 25th must have been last year. And it was a wonderful, warm evening in which all of the original players, some of whom are here today, got up and talked a few minutes reflecting on how they had helped him to build a really extraordinary network of people, self-energized and intelligent and doing important stuff all over the political landscape. And the striking thing, listening to their stories, was every one of them sooner or later got to an account of the moment that they had disappointed Ralph. And they were all amusing stories, but you could tell that they all felt that one of the strongest qualities about Ralph was his intensity and unswerving dedication, and they made small jokes about this. And then I got up very late in the evening and I said, if you think you disappointed Ralph, you should have been a newspaper reporter. What he did was many-faceted, but if you boiled it down to one idea, and I thought more and more, I should make one other point about Ralph. I had this experience, and I think Ruben and Al and probably others here who've known him a long, long time have had similar experiences. But as I get older and wiser, and I think of some great insight about the American political system and how things really work, and sort of scribbling notes of my thoughts and congratulating myself on my brilliance. And then it suddenly clicks in. This is what Nader was trying to tell me 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, or even 20 years ago. And I'm not exaggerating. That's happened to me again and again. So in addition to all his other qualities, he does have a vision of what is unfulfilled in our democracy. And here I would boil it down to this one point, that our politics is now surrounded by technocratic expertise in one form or another, whether it's lawyers or scientists, economists, et cetera, et cetera. And those skills of analysis are all quite valuable. They're also very expensive, so they tend to get hired by the interests with the resources to hire them. But Ralph's insight was that there's a deep bias in a lot of those disciplines, and that the analysis is not done from a broad public interest perspective. It is not grounded in the experience of ordinary people. So in a way, what he has been doing over 25 years is teaching people who have some access to those skills, who understand these higher disciplines, to interpret, translate in terms of a much broader constituency. And that's work that never ends, perhaps, but I think you can look around Washington and really every state and local capital in the country and see how the mechanisms of government have been changed, reformed, opened up, flowing from that one insight. Now, the other thought I would add is that that may be insufficient. We may need to rethink at this point what else is necessary to redress the political imbalance in the society. This country is troubled, we all know, and confused, and the ability to resolve great public issues is bound by so many powerful counter-influences that even the best intentions wind up stalemated. You could follow the current debates on a dozen issues in Washington, D.C. and see what I mean. I think, I guess what I'm speaking now to these young winners who I have a hunch, if they don't become Ralph Nader, they will in one way or another in their lives go forward with the values they've already expressed. I congratulate them for that. But I think they need to think about how you can reorganize and rebuild and reinvent, really, the way people get power in this society. If that doesn't happen, I think we have the potential to become, frankly, a very ugly place. And some would say we're headed that way already. The good side is that the people have already expressed their desire for this. And the Post, was it today or yesterday, ran yet another story about how angry Americans are about their government. This is not exactly news, but I think it's good that the Washington Post is reminding people. We need to now take that anger and turn it back into representative democracy. Right.
retired still, but he still works. All of these, someone else, just get someone else. What concerns me is the traditional idea of what it was to have to start even appeal was we had a lot of well-educated people, a lot of really smart people.
Right.
Yeah, I called up one local this morning. They said, oh, no, we're not planning on covering it. I said, well, out of curiosity, what is on your docket this morning? She said, well, this is the 1-year anniversary of the missing child. By now, they're not going to find it. What's the key? Where do you sense it? We're on the side.
No, I care. I think we decided we have to do that. What's still moving? Question is, we
Well, we're going to go back to right, you're not interested in the side.
and if I no, we would never. That's right.
And I said, Ralph, I can't be the reporter from Washington Post. You know, I don't know anything about this stuff. He said, don't worry, he's a reporter. He won't know anything either.
Your invention that I'm
So smart. Who knows it? But I haven't heard a single, that whole galaxy of reform proposals. If they were all put in actually together,
and it's been and that's what it's called out.
String it out.
How about someone who worked with Ralph for 10 years, ultimately as director of Public Citizens Commerce Watch, Washington's largest consumer lobby, who has written 15 books and more than 250 magazine and professional articles on government, law, and business, who has testified 50 times before Congress and has lectured at 60 universities, who has served as New York City's Commissioner of the Department of Consumer Affairs and was recently elected New York City's Public Advocate, a position formerly called the City Council President, and next in the line of succession to Mayor Rudy Giuliani. It's my pleasure to present Mr. Mark Green.
Thank you, Alan, for the progressive vision that led to the Gleitsman Foundation, for recognizing all these people who were worthy of honor, for coming up with the perfect gimmick to have a Nader reunion, a free although the room does not exactly remind me of the first Bird offices. When Sam Simon when Bill Bryd was speaking about Nader's Raiders, it reminded me that so often in history, an institution will come up with a critical phrase for the bothersome gadflies on the outside. And so muckrakers was originally a term of derision, which became a term of pride. Bill reminded me capitalism was invented by socialists to put down people who had capital. A children's crusade to put down Gene McCarthy. And now Nader's Raiders, Ralph may have bellyached about it originally, but now it's a term of art that I'm proud of. I'm proud because the one and only time I met Richard Nixon, the other big RN in town. In 1971, I'm on a receiving line, someone whispers into his ear, and then I shake his hand. He goes, "Oh, you must be one of those Raiders Naders." And I resisted saying, "Thank you, Nixon Richard." I didn't. And I really want to thank Alan for letting me, a lowly non-Princetonian, speak to this body. I fill the only slot that they allowed. And Alan, of course, had to invite me to speak because I was the only person who worked for Ralph who has escaped and thrived. Usually there's a web which requires you to work like Alan or Sid or Joan or others, 22 years or more, or come back and consult pro bono from time to time. Somehow I did it. I did disappoint Ralph. When I did this, I called him then the Raider of the Lost Mark. Probably the worst pun ever. But while we're on puns, we're here to honor someone who, consistent with the movie reference of the decade that he champions, he is a rebel without a pause. He is someone who so incessantly, like Socrates, as Senator Bryd mentioned, raises embarrassing questions that other people are afraid to do. That is, there's some fairy tale, and I've never gotten it quite straight, of the mice who were terrorized by the cat. And someone simply has to put a bell around the cat's head so they'll hear the cat and know to get back into the hole so none of them will jeopardize them. And none of the mice want to bell the cat because they put themselves at risk. And Ralph daily is looking for cats to bell to warn all the rest of us about dangers that may be out there. We're here to honor this rebel because not only his personal traits, I've read, I don't know if it's true, that to complain about the white shoe tradition at Princeton when Ralph was there, 55 to 58, he one day wore a bathrobe to class. Of course, some people would say his clothes have not substantially improved since then. And in an article I read yesterday, Ralph, by Ken Oletta in the Esquire, he did this profile of you about a decade ago. He said that one day when you were visiting a university, a student gave you a tuna fish sandwich, and consistent with Ralph, he said, "Is this today's tuna?" Any man who will ask about the age of the tuna he's eating is someone who is consistent. And so beyond the personal traits that we all love and mock, are three traits which have added up to someone who I have no doubt will be regarded, whether Jonas Salk or the Martin Luther King, as one of the people who most left their mark on this century. And the traits are persistence and fearlessness and authenticity. Now the persistence, somebody who will lose a manuscript, the only manuscript, unsafe at any speed, and rewrite it, is someone who is persistent. Someone who fights for a couple of decades for airbags, who studied the history of how great reforms, from labor law reforms to consumer reforms, sometimes takes decades, is someone who shows that persistence. And Ralph understands that the winner often in public policy is the last one to cry uncle. And I remember in 1972 or 3, Ralph and I and probably Joan and a couple of other people met Jeanette Rankin, who was then about 93 years old, a great suffragette who had a year to live. And I asked her, how did you spend all these decades fighting for women's rights? She was the first woman ever elected to the United States Congress. Cast her first vote against World War I. And then her Montana district voted her out of office because she stood up for herself. By the way, she came back in 1940 after that hiatus. You got it. In time to vote, since she's a pacifist, against World War II. And was then voted out again. Speak about uncomfortable questions. And I said, how did you keep this up decade after decade? And she said, you can't lose if you never give up. She said, you can't lose if you never give up. And I don't know a real-life motto that is more representative of Ralph's ethic in life than that. Second is fearlessness. I don't even have to bother talking about this. The bigger they are, the more eager he is to speak his mind, from presidents on up. And it doesn't matter the source of the injustice. He is a tiger, to use the Princeton metaphor. But finally, and I think most important, and it's the lesson I've tried to learn most from Ralph, is authenticity. I remember we were once at Harvard Law School. Ralph was speaking and I was speaking, and it was in the mid-70s, and a student stood up and started talking about your clothes and the boots and the payphone, and said, how do you live up to your image? And Ralph immediately said, I don't know what you're talking about. Any image lives up to me. And it was not a self-centered remark. It was simply, here's who I am, and if journalists tend to write about the style rather than the substance, that's their problem. And so here we have someone who in a online interactive era still hands out brochures and books one by one. And in about the year 2020, he'll get rid of all the Who Runs Congresses stored up at Peace Street. Now the results of these three traits is first a public indebted to a man who really has saved more lives than Mother Teresa and Albert Schweitzer combined. A public indebted to this pro-democracy leader. I mean, if anyone is our Havel or Walensa, the person in the streets is trying to remind people that every individual counts and should vote, it's this honoree. We in this room owe Ralph a great debt. But what the sit-down strikes in the 30s were to labor leaders today, or the sit-ins in Greensboro, were to the civil rights revolution. Our early years in the late 60s and early 70s are to us. They're a bonding time which left an imprint on us. And frankly, I am indebted to Ralph, not only for the 14 books I never earned a penny from that I wrote with him, but I am indebted in a bigger way, which is, I can't tell you how often I am now in a public situation that I've never been in before. And I'll say, gee, what am I supposed to say or do now? And I unconsciously reach back to that time in the early 70s and will often mimic or approximate how Ralph would have answered, what Ralph would have said. Because of his integrity, persistence, and authenticity, he is someone who we can all learn from. I'm sure the honorees, as Bill Bryd said, will learn from his legacy in life. And Bill Veeck, a famous baseball owner in the 50s who owned the Cleveland Indians, once said that everything changes except baseball and paper clips. And to that duo, we all have to add Ralph Nader. Congratulations, Ralph.
Story here, because there is another university, happens to be Cornell, that had Michael Schwerner and Mark Green and Alan Gleitsman. So we're chasing after them a little bit. We haven't caught them yet. Dr. Marvin Bressler, professor of sociology emeritus, was chairman of the sociology department at Princeton for over 20 years. And Wendy Kopp's advisor. He's the author of numerous works, and has served as a consultant on educational and social policy at both the state and national level. He's currently the chair of the Research and Advisory Committee of the General Accounting Office, a position he has held through both Democratic and Republican administrations. In her senior year at Princeton, Wendy developed the concept, as you well know now, of a National Teachers Corps, and it eventually became the basis for Teach for America. Who better to give us some insights into that time than Dr. Marvin Bressler?
Don't be deceived. The word emeritus means unemployed. And on the other hand, it is rather jolting. I don't have tenure now. And on the other hand, I don't have a job, so the two are somehow consistent. One of the advertised joys of, what's the current euphemism, being a senior citizen in his golden years, it's not altogether clear to me why I would be harmed if I were 30. But one of the alleged joys is that you can graduate into the ranks of the codgers. I've always, it was my ambition that if things went well, I would go from curmudgeon to codger. And one of the pleasures of codgerdom is you can deplore the young. And, well, it's always easy. The easiest thing for any professor to do is you say they can't write. And of course they can't write. If their role models are so bad, they read academic prose. But my great sorrow is I think they're terrific. Much better than our generation. There was a generation, the current generation is famous as it was in Wendy's time when she was still young, a half a decade ago. The generation is famous for its apathy. Well, my generation, the 30s, committed to Marxism and the total reconstruction of the world that ultimately led to a slow descent into Princeton. My generation was thought to be activist, full of wrath and vision. I can't speak for others in my generation, my undergraduate generation. I sat around Temple University, proud that it wasn't Princeton, that I belonged to the people. And by way of recompense, never stirred from a cafe table. I remade the entire Soviet Union daily. And some days I told Trotsky what to do, other days I told Stalin what to do. There is no record of myself ever having done anything, except to buy Russian blouses with billowy sleeves to show I really belong to the proletariat. This current generation is really quite remarkable in that respect. And if I may say, prior to talking about Wendy and talking about Ralph, I've taught a freshman seminar this year on the rethinking the 60s and so forth. And again it emerged that there were a few authentic voices that seemed credible to the students, that seemed to suggest to them that this whole immobile, vaguely corrupt society, as they had viewed it, could nevertheless be moved. I think Ralph Nader was a very, very important factor, I don't know if he likes to think of himself this way, in maintaining campus security in a certain sense. Insurrections would have been much more violent, much more disillusioned and so on, if from time to time people could not have said, it's not hopeless. We have people who are credible. We have people who have invested their lives and their emotions in making society better. In much the same way, Wendy Kopp is in that tradition. That tradition what might be called entrepreneurial populism. A kind of linking of solidarity with the people, to use an older vocabulary, with real programs. This story has been told many times. I no longer remember, and I've told it many times, I don't remember what's true because I add various details as we go along. But the general outlines of it are this. This young woman wandered into my office one day. of serene and reasonable and softly spoken. And she had a sort of interesting idea. She was going to write a senior thesis on voluntarism in the United States, specifically on teacher. Previous efforts to enlist, voluntary efforts to improve education. And it had the following elements she explained to me. Now, you understand that the person who is listening to this understands that if you want to change a distribution requirement so that history is now called part of the humanities rather than the social sciences, that can convulse the average faculty for 3 years. And lifelong friendships are dissolved over this issue and so on. And she was proposing the following. She was going to write this thesis in which she could barely show any interest. But the real point of this thesis was going to lead to something. And what it was going to lead to was the developing of a teacher corps. And it was going to have the following elements. And there's this young woman, soft-spoken. She shows every sign of sanity. And what the developments are, she's going to start, beginning next fall, to organize 300 campuses to help her recruit people for a project called, as yet unnamed, but let's call it Teach for America. She's going to establish a summer institute at Berkeley, at the University of Southern California, where the cream of America's professoriate is going to speak, and the Nader tradition for nothing. She is going to overcome the opposition of school boards and teachers' unions, and she's going to induce a generation world famous for its apathy to engage in a kind of a Tolstoyan Christian missionary zeal in going into precisely the most difficult schools, and she's going to do it within a year. I'm a wise man by definition, certified, a certified tenured priest. And I know psychosis when I see it. And I say to her, as any nurturing, warm advisor would say, my dear Miss Kopp, you are quite obviously deranged. And why don't you try A, B, and C? So she went away, thought about A, B, and C. Came back and said, I like my idea better. I said, well, it's still D, E, and F. I am not a man without resources. D, E, and F. She said, I like my idea better. The result, as you all know. And one of the joys of this, and one of the reasons that you do applaud the current generation, is they are much more likely to disregard the jaundiced advice of their so-called wiser elders. I cannot tell you how much I admire her for not listening to me. I don't want to take that thought out altogether because, I mean, I want to extend it to its logical conclusion or else my entire career lies in shambles. But there is nevertheless a kind of a fundamental integrity in her, which is also comforting by for the generation. I would like to rephrase some of the things that Mark Green said, and I agree on the whole. I do believe to accomplish anything of any great merit, you got to go too far. You have to have a disproportionate sense of the importance of what you're doing. I don't know anybody with a flawless sense of proportion, either in the world of programs or in the world of the intellect, that ever really made his mark on history. Marx went too far, Freud went too far, John Stuart Mill went too far, Adam Smith went too far, and 1,000 tenured maggots stood on the sidelines and said, you're going too far. And we were right, and they were wrong, and our names will be dust, and theirs will be honored. Well, so you do have that. Now, the beauty of Wendy, in that respect, is never have I seen so much passion disguised as serenity. There is, when she debates with you, she respects your view. There's a kind of a gentle, I don't want to be misunderstood about this, a gentle and sweet arrogance about her. There's a kind of a gentle and sweet arrogance about her in which the assertion is, she's listened to you with great respect, you happen to be wrong. It is a fact of life that you happen to be wrong. And she conveys that without any rancor, without any pride. The last, second and concluding thing I want to say about people that I admire in this area is that they are not only the consciences of the various groups in which they are. There is, in every faculty at least, somebody who is the conscience of the faculty. At any given moment, no scheme is utopian enough, no action is pure enough. The common characteristics of the advertised conscience of the faculty is he always loses. And he takes a certain degree of pride in defeat. The great stunt is to mobilize poetry and reason and program in the name of that conscience. And to do so frequently without any sort of ideological guidance. The splendor of somebody like Wendy is when she started out, she had only the vaguest notions of how to put this into action. Fortunately, she had the support of a nurturing thesis advisor. But if she hadn't had that, it's difficult to know how she would have gone ahead. One of the things that guides any, quote, activist is that except in the most general sense, you proceed without the comfort of ideology. You don't have this guide, this roadmap. It's partially improvisational. It's partially a willingness to compromise. It's partially when to say yes and when to say no. So I conclude. There's an interesting parable in, there's also a need to understand the culture of the various places in which you work. In my own tradition, I'm going to tell you two parables in my own tradition. When I was at New York University, I was once visited by a young man with long sideburns and a skull cap. And he had come to the University of Leiden. He had gone to see the holy man of Crown Heights, who had told him to come to see me because he was interested in doing some research. The research he was interested in doing was something called, he was interested in working on Navajo. What is Navajo, you ask? I had no idea, but I'm a world-famous scholar, and I wasn't going to confide that to him. So I said to him, are you interested in the anthropological aspects of Navajo or the sociological aspects of Navajo? He said both, but maybe in a language that wasn't quite French, it wasn't quite English, it wasn't quite Yiddish, both. But maybe more on the anthropological side. But I wind up again. Are you interested in the cultural anthropological aspects of Navajo or the physical anthropological aspects of Navajo? And he said, both. So I said, look here, spell that word. And he spelled it, N-A-V-A-J-O, Navajo. He was going to study the Navajo. Well, you proceed without guideposts. That whole set of working with groups with whom you don't have immediate cultural ties is something that you have to master. And another parable in the final. You know, in the Jewish tradition, Maimonides, when he, in his works, had two, well, on the right-hand side of the page, give all the reasons of speaking against the existence of God. On the other side of the page was all the refutations. So you read first why God didn't exist, and then he took care of it by showing that he did. And you weren't supposed to read Maimonides because sometimes he made the arguments where, if you were really pious, sometimes he made the arguments that make God's existence too powerful. And so the story goes that a particularly old pious man, beyond question, no longer corrupted by agnosticism, asked whether he could read Maimonides. He asked the leader, and he was told no. And the reason is that he said, look, you're an old man. Senior citizen, in his golden years. You were an old man. You'll read that. You'll read that into the night because you're a serious scholar. You made those off. And you may spend the whole night outside the comfort of God. Because the next morning if you get up, you will read all these reassuring reasons why God exists. Who, for the sake of arrogant casuistry, would spend the whole night without the comfort of God? The answer is all those people who go forth in a society which is hard to move without having the necessary or having the total set of prerequisites which are required to do that, without ideological charts, without knowing whether they're going to win, and passion, and with a grand sense of disproportion, willing to go temporarily without the comfort of God, with the assurance that ultimately they're doing the Lord's work. That's what the best activists do, and that's what Wendy did. Thank you.
We have just a short bit here that I'd like to ask. If we can bring a microphone to Debbie King, she come here.
I don't like following that act either. Can you all hear me without a microphone? Yeah. I've been told I have a big mouth, so. I just wanted to do something. I had the awful urge when I was up on the podium a while ago, and I just felt like I can't leave this room without doing it. So if you would indulge me for just a moment, would you all please stand up just for a moment? I'm going to turn the tables on you for 10. You know when they people say, stand when your name's mentioned and I'm sitting in the wheelchair. I have the awful urge to get a flag and raise it or something, you know. But I'd like for you to indulge me. When I mention something that affects you directly, would you please sit down? Okay, with all the people in, let me preface this, the Webster's definition of a handicap is anything that's less than perfect. In other words, perfect, and the perfect height has been said 5'6" is the average perfect height. So would everyone in the room that's not 5'6" please sit down? The next thing was going to be if you wear glasses, would you please sit down? You see, those are two things. Glasses are really a way that it's accepted for you to see. If you take your glasses off, you can't see at all. I use this wheelchair as a vehicle to get around. If I'm not confined to a wheelchair, I'm released by the wheelchair. Were it not for the wheelchair, I would truly be confined. Your glasses have come to be accepted. My wheelchair will one day soon come to be accepted. If we look around us, we will find that each of us have a handicap. If you're in a dark room watching a movie and your hair is a little balding on top and there's a light reflecting down, you're a handicap to the person in front of you. We all have our own handicap. I just thought I would interject that because that's some of the things that I did at the university. I want us to live as brothers and sisters, not able-bodied disabled. and that type of thing. We're all in this world together. Let's make the best of it, and ramps, not steps.
I'm glad that Marvin Ressler doesn't have to go after that. That was a good turnaround. I would like to thank our distinguished honorees, our presenters, and our other guests for participating in this day, which has served to recognize the fine work of 7 extraordinary individuals. They have left a lasting imprint on our culture that will hopefully inspire succeeding generations in the value of service and the power of the individual to promote change. It's the hope of the Gleitsman Foundation that this country will continue to produce such people as Ralph Nader and Wendy Kopp, and the 5 Schwerner winners who will hopefully one day be in that category. And I thank you for your time and being with us today, and for us all to remember that it is activists like we have seen today that really are the future of the world in which we live. Thank you very much.